back to Buzz City Breakdown, everybody. My name's Owen Watterson, columnist for Hornets on SI. You can also find me on Substack at the Saturday Stinger. I also do Hornets history, all the way into the Hornets community, guys. Beside me, I have Albert Betcher, another writer for us here at Hornets on SI. It's just going to be the two of us today, but we're going to try and hit everything that happened in this past West Coast road trip. For it to just been the past 7 days, these 4 games, I feel like there's a lot to talk about. So let's just really jump right into it, man, because Phoenix, Albert, to me, was a sign of a team that it felt to me like the first time they really underestimated somebody. And there was a part of it that was they moved, they had 1 day off on that Saturday before the Sunday game against Phoenix, right? That was their travel day. Okay, and then Saturday night before they played Phoenix on Sunday, they lost an hour of sleep. I think there was a lot more going into that game than just the Hornets underestimating them totally. But Phoenix is a good team. Phoenix is a good team. Former, color analyst for the Hornets, from the original Hornets, Gil McGregor, his son does some work for one of the media companies out there and covers the Suns. And I was listening to him talk about the team. They have a bunch of really good young talent. Colin Gillespie is, up for most improved player right now. They just kind of beat the Hornets in a lot of aspect. And it was the first kind of, whoa, where's their defense at? Sign, I feel like, for this road trip. What did you think about Phoenix, Albert?
Yeah, pretty much the same things you already said. I wouldn't necessarily say I felt like they totally underestimated them, but there was for sure like a lack of urgency at certain times. And that's something that this team has kind of brought consistently over like the last 3 months or so during all of the winning streaks, all of that. And there's, looking at who the Suns were missing, Mark Williams was out, Dylan Brooks, no Grayson Allen, I think, no Jordan Goodwin. So 4 rotation guys, you kind of maybe expect to be a little relaxed, but that's exactly what you shouldn't do. And that's kind of what managed to kind of screw them over in the end. I thought there was never really a point where it felt like the Hornets had control of the game. And that's
Well said.
something that even through, the past weeks where there have been some shaky performances here and there, as is natural, you always had the feeling at some point that they were kind of taking the game and
Mm-hmm.
and getting like a run going. And that was just never really the case. And you mentioned the young talent for Phoenix. There was a big Rasheer Fleming game, which I did not expect. They had a pretty solid minutes from Maluak at the center spot, who made Ryan look a bit uh, not so good at times.
To,
So
to,
yeah,
to, to, to Ryan's credit, one of the first times he's really struggled here in the past couple weeks, it feels like. He had like a brief stint, it felt like, after he came back from injury, that he really struggled to kind of
yeah,
ramp back up and get back. But then he had a really good stretch. And then you're right, Phoenix was the first time that it felt like somebody really took it to him. And they really like Rasheer Fleming out there in Phoenix. They are really high on Rasheer Fleming and what he can become. And like you said, the role player is missing from that Phoenix game. I'm sitting here talking about, I think the Hornets underestimated. Frankly, I underestimated them. I just want to be very honest about that. So it was nice to see, and I wrote this past Saturday in my weekly column I do over there, talking about Matt Ishbia and the Suns league wide. I'd say, less than 2 years ago, it felt like when Bradley Beal and KD and everybody was still there. I feel like the league wide consensus was, whoa, this cap situation and this stuff they got going on in Phoenix with this new owner who wanted to win too fast is about to explode in their face. And I think everybody viewed them as, one of the worst off situations in the league. And, here they are with a positive record fighting, for a playoff spot in the West. I got to give a lot of props to Devin Booker. Back to the Hornets, though, because you mentioned that was such a great point you said about it. Never felt like they had control of the game. Like Portland and Sacramento, it was late in those games, but I felt that same thing in Portland and
exactly.
Sacramento
Yeah,
that you're talking about. And then in Sunday, this just yesterday, Saturday, excuse me, against San Antonio when they lost, there was a brief moment there when they got it to, I think it was under 9 in the fourth quarter. I was like, or 8, I think it was.
yeah,
San Antonio called a timeout, and then San Antonio just took off after that timeout, and it was never close again. And this is the worst part of the season to start seeing some of these trends. But to move to Portland, Kobe White sat out that game. Different injury management we saw from the Hornets on a back-to-back this time. We've seen them sit Grant and Kobe and then play them both on the second half of the back-to-back, but this time they kind of reversed their roles a little bit and switched it up, and how they were managing them, which, makes sense given Sacramento was one of the teams you were playing, even despite how that game went. But Portland, they're a good team. Miles said it in one of his post-practice interviews, I think just a week and a half ago, something after they played them the first time, that they're a good team and nobody really talks about it. But, Avdia had that offense on a string all night long. And there was a moment there until they took over that I was feeling that same thing you were talking about in Phoenix, Albert. Now, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on Portland. But they did it. They seized it. Same thing they did the next night, and it was a good character win, because had they have dropped to Portland, I feel like we'd be feeling a little bit more bleak about this West Coast road trip that just ended up at 2-2 instead of 1-3. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Going 1-3 would have been very disappointing, in my opinion. So at least that didn't happen. But I mean, you already kind of talked about the Phoenix game, how they never got on that. And then in the Portland game, you have to, give credit to Phoenix again. Looking back, they hit some really tough shots as well during maybe a phase where the Hornets could have kind of taken control of the game. You had Colin Gillespie hitting crazy jumpers. I mean, he's had a breakout year, but still, to see it was
Thought we
pretty
were playing
unexpected for me.
Indiana again for a second. I thought it was looking at TJ McConnell there for a while.
Exactly.
Keep going.
Yeah. So Portland they are a team that can run into offensive struggles, even despite, Danny Avdija having this pretty kind of breakout year for them offensively. They can run into turnover issues as well. And so I thought the Hornets at least did a good job of not letting that 19-point deficit, I think, in the second quarter. Didn't let that discourage them, kept on just kind of keeping on, staying in the game. And then when they slowly but surely got back into it, they didn't let the Blazers kind of punk them again. And they managed to close it out with that con charge in the end that he took, which was to me probably like the play of the week, if we want to give that award out right now. I thought that was like a great moment to see from him at that age, to have like that awareness to step over, take the charge. So yeah, for sure wasn't pretty, especially offensively. Kind of the rim pressure wasn't there really all night, but they got it done. So it is what it is.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned rim pressure, because I feel like the games where Kobe White isn't playing, you really start to see, despite all the flaws Colin Sexton had, you really start to see what his purpose was of being on this team, was a guy that could put pressure on the rim for the Hornets at least. Donovan Cleveland was also super impressive for the Trailblazers, I feel like, all night, like he has been all season. It was nice to kind of watch him play real time for a full game while I'm paying attention to every detail of the game. Musa had some battles this week, I think, against some unexpected competition. That's for sure. And I don't want to, that con point to get lost, because that's definitely the play of the week. I mean, it won them that game. And Eric Collins said this on the broadcast, I believe, but it was either his first or second charge. I never checked into that, but it was either his first or second charge all season, so of his entire pro career. It's about time. I feel like they haven't taken a lot all year. I'm not sure what Kemba's doing over at practice with them, but he's not helping these guys learn to take charges. Come on, that was his thing. Portland was a big deal, and Scoot started that game. They did a really good job, I think, throughout that game shutting down Scoot, because he started off that game super hot in the first quarter and he was silent till the fourth. After that, Avdija was the guy that really struggled with, and it's been interesting because it wasn't just Avdija. On Tuesday, it was the same thing with DeRozan again the next night, like getting into Sacramento. I mean, you want to talk about a early 2000s, almost 40 ball, like ethical. People were arguing about Bam's 83 and ethical hoops or not. You talk about ethical 40 ball, and that's DeMar DeRozan, what he did on Wednesday, even though I don't even know. I think he stuck at 39 by the end of it. But as much as I'm joking, that's been a problem for the Hornets, for the teams, even these worst teams that have, those go-to guys. The things that we see flashes of from Brandon Miller when he can get to the elbow or get to the block, and we see those nice examples of the footwork and the fadeaway, the gravity fade that we see from him, as Del Curry likes to say. But I don't feel like the Hornets get that on a consistent night to night basis yet, because these guys are still young in the way that a DeMar DeRozan is capable of doing when a team isn't quite prepared to defend him the way they need to. You know what I mean? So a lot of props to DeMar for not attempting. He attempted 1 3 and it was in garbage time at the end.
Yeah.
It was a crazy game to watch. But again, important to note, like you were saying early in this, that for a moment there, you could completely see with your own eyes in real time the momentum shift, and the Hornets grabbed that game by the throat and shut down DeMar just for a time that they needed to, and really stagnate that Kings offense. Brandon forced that third quarter. I think I can't remember what the timestamps were, but over halfway through that quarter, the Kings in the third had only scored 16 points, I think, and they had scored 62 in the first half. So they tightened it up a lot in that third quarter, and that really led to what became the win down the line. So impressive win, I think, in Sacramento, despite a lot of people giving them crap for letting it be as close as it was. DeMar was on one, simple as that.
Yeah, this was kind of a. I felt very antsy after this game, especially heading into San Antonio. Um, we're going to talk about the defense maybe a bit more uh, in general later, but this was just another example, as you mentioned, when the opposing team has a go-to guy, especially someone who's strong at operating from the mid-range, has like a number of moves that you can get to the rim to. They have no answers for that. It was the same thing with KD, I think, like 2 or 3 weeks ago. And of course, KD is a fantastic player. It's not easy to stop him, but the Hornets don't have anybody who can even put up a fight. That's kind of the issue here. It's not about, when KD scores 40 points against you, sometimes it's okay. If DeRozan scores 30 points against you, it's fine. But if he scores 39 on, I think, 17 of 22 shooting,
Something like
that
that.
is that was very, very worrying to me. And it was again, even though, as you mentioned, they had like that stretch where they managed to take control, I was just missing for about 3 quarters of the game, like just this sense of urgency defensively to kind of deny the actions that Sacramento wanted to get into. They take the least threes of any NBA team. They want to get to the mid range. They want DeRozan to kind of get into his zones and his areas where he's strong from, and to not be able to deny that pretty much at all. That was worrying for sure.
Right, because you're talking about you're absolutely right about the actions they like to run for DeRozan, because it's almost a variation of what Denver does for Jokic, but for DeRozan, and so they operate it a little bit differently. But they use the fact that DeRozan is a good playmaker and that he's much more agile. No offense to Jokic, the multiple time MVP, but they use him in that way, and it's. You mentioned Kevin Durant, and this is a perfect segue into San Antonio, and we can get to the defense after that, because it all is kind of bundled into one. Truly, you're right. It is one thing when it's KD, and it's one thing when it's Victor Wembanyama with what he did on Saturday night, because they hovered around the same little deficit most of that game, but it goes back to what we're talking about. They couldn't grasp it, and you just can't have those nights against DeMar. And Sion's done well all season, but I don't know that I've been able to quite decide yet definitively whether it's a team defense thing right now, or if these guys are just tired legs and this is the last last main road trip of the season. If I'm not mistaken, they play 7 game homestand, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but then they fly 2 hours to go play Brooklyn at the Barclays Center, Jay-Z Center, I prefer to say. And then they come back for their last back-to-back in Spectrum Center, and they only have maybe 2, 3 road games after that, just off the top of my head. And this is not where you need to be going into. They still have to play Detroit. I think they still have to play New York twice, if I'm not mistaken. They still have to play Boston twice. They have one of the toughest remaining schedules left in the NBA. Last time I checked Tankathon, it was like 10th or 11th. Like,
Yeah, 10th is I think the number. Yeah,
and I don't want to be too doom and gloom because I just finished writing something before we got on about how it was never meant to all happen in one magical season for the Hornets. But
for sure.
in terms of the tunnel vision of thinking like, okay, the play-in's right in front of us. What can we tighten up to give ourselves the best chance? Because the feel good and the house money stuff is cool until you accidentally get beat in your first play-in game again, and then I think you do have to look back and say it was a little bit of a failure given what you had, because look what that first round series did for Detroit last year against New York. It
Incredible.
was so it's so critical for them this year. And Wemby's one thing, but the Portland and Sacramento defense was concerning. And frankly, despite Victor and his performance on Saturday, I think the defense got better on Saturday because San Antonio is a really, really good team. If they would have played the same level of defense they did Wednesday against Sacramento, they allowed about the same points to Sacramento and San Antonio.
Yeah. No.
Right. It's exactly what I'm saying. It would have been a 15, 20-point differential. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on Wemby and just, the Hornets can't get it done in prime time. I don't know what the deal is with that either. Doesn't matter. Maybe we'll never win on national TV again. What do you think?
I mean, I agree in the sense that I thought the defense was better. They forced Wemby to take a lot of jump shots. He also wanted to take them at a certain point because he could tell that he was hot and they were going in. But probably the best thing you can do against Wemby is to kind of force him into those long twos, get a hand up, kind of just hope that that's enough. There's not much more you can do against him. And they managed to do that. So I was fine with the defensive effort in that game. I thought the offense was kind of what probably killed them in that one. They missed a bunch of good threes. They also, another theme that's kind of been present in all of the games this week, they struggled to find any offensive rhythm in the non-LaMelo minutes. Just through, I think Brent Miller finished with 6 points, 2 of 14 shooting, 2 of 13.
Wasn't good.
Which can happen at certain points, especially when you're that young and it's still like a kind of figuring it out process on national TV, which of course is the biggest opponent for the Hornets always. So yeah, I thought with the other games there were a lot of defensive issues that I wasn't happy with. In this one, they just couldn't get it done offensively. Conceding 115 to San Antonio isn't great, but it's okay, it's fine. Only scoring 102 is the problem. And getting back to, the rim pressure point from, I think, the Phoenix or the Portland game. Of course, this is like the worst opponent to put rim pressure on because against Wembanyama, it's just really tough. But their inability to do that against Portland just made it even tougher in this one. So yeah, that's what I thought just kind of kept them from ever getting really close in that one again.
Outside of the few national TV games I've been able to catch from the Spurs, I've seen it a few times, but golly, the amount of times in this game that firsthand I got to see, Grant literally like back it all the way out to the 3-point line. Like halfway through this game, these guys are like, can I even get into the paint and do anything? And it's got to be more credit to him because you're right. I feel like they did try and put more rim pressure on, but it almost came out of, like you said, they weren't shooting the best from three, and when they are getting there, they don't really have any other choice but to try and get to the rim. And it was just, it felt like a sense of a game where they did their best, but the best of what they had that day, completely was the exact opposite of what they really needed in order to win the game. If that makes sense of what I'm saying.
That makes sense, yeah.
I'm interested to hear your perspective on this, just to kind of get the defense talk started briefly, Albert. Like, I've been back and forth on how I view Brandon's potential, I think, as not as a whole scorer I think we've seen, but it's on these nights where they aren't the best defensively. What do you think of his potential long term, do you think, in terms of being a number one defender? Because honestly, in my opinion, he's the number one defender right now on this team in terms of the starters. But I think if a game were to close in a closing scenario, it's going to be Sion because I think he's the best defensive player on this team right now. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this because I think it really affects where the view of Brandon Miller long term has to go, depending on what you think of what he can be on that side of the ball.
This all ties back to the Houston game again with KD, where they had Brand Miller on him to begin the game, and then late they went to Sion. They went to him on the final possession where KD just kind of shrugged him off, shot over him.
Fair point.
At this point, I'm not positive that Brand Miller can be that kind of number one defensive guy for you, who, when you have a final possession, you have one guy on the opposing team where he can get to a spot. You need to stop him, need to at least make it tough on him. I don't think he can probably be that guy, especially not if you expect him to take on like a huge offensive load in the future. We don't really know how he will how his shot profile will evolve in the next couple of years, how his volume will evolve, especially with Con's, development. But to me, from what I've seen this season, also it's important to mention he was grimacing, I think, last night on the bench. There seems to be like still something kind of wrong with him. Seems like something's nagging him in some way. So
Yeah.
to at least give him that credit, but from what I've seen this season, I'm not positive that this will be like the guy you throw on Kevin Durant or DeMar DeRozan or those type of scorers. What do you think?
I really like the point that you made there in terms of how the offensive output that they essentially put on his 1.5 shoulders right now, every single night affects how you view that. And to give you a lot of credit, I don't know that I was really putting that into the equation of how I was viewing that enough, but that's a really good point because I think of a guy like Davion Mitchell, right? They don't expect a lot out of him offensively, but
Not at all. No.
but on the defensive end, I think they call him straight jacket, I think is what they call that guy. Like, I do think that part of the equation matters a lot because we do this thing a lot in sports where things are black or they're white, and more often than not, they're color in the middle. You know what I mean? And that's a great because I want to compare it to LaMelo Ball because nobody really ever thought LaMelo could be an elite defender, but we all said, I feel like, for a long time that if he could do what he's doing now on his best nights and get his hands in the passing lanes and use his anticipation to his advantage, that would make him the best version of himself. And I think, this is to be decided really, but I'm of the opinion when they spread out the offense more and they get more defensively from Brandon, like in that second half against Sacramento. And Brandon Miller I think he had 3-4 steals in the second half of that game. When he's doing that on the defensive end, it gives them an incredible chance to win because he can do it. We were talking about that anticipation for LaMelo. I think he can do it because he's got the long arms. But the injury matters, the offensive output matters because I think more often than not, we've seen a couple of LaMelo fireballs this year, but I mean, more often than not, I think if we went back and tallied who had more than 20 to 25 points the most times, it's probably Brandon. It's probably, oh man, it'd be close. It'd be close. They've all really spread out the love this year, but man, there's a lot of nuance into this argument, and I think that's what makes the max contract extension and just the contract extension in general for him this summer so interesting because there's so much that we haven't seen yet. This is still technically his second season in the NBA, even though it's his third because of the injury last year. He only played a couple weeks. Like, he's injured now. It just makes me nervous. You know what I mean? And I think I said this in some writing somewhere before. I just don't even remember where that. It reminds me of Batum, but that's no shade to Brandon at all. We get war flashbacks. Like, everything is going so well right now in Charlotte that I see the very negative reality where whether it's, God forbid, an injury or something awful like that, where they pay Brandon max money and then they really cap strap themselves bad after not this season, but the next season when his extension would kick in. That's what's scary. I think it's the past and the history that scares me, but to give these new owners a lot of credit, they're trying to kill a lot of that, habitual thinking we do up here as Hornets followers. So, wow. I don't know that there really is an answer as much as I wanted your opinion.
I mean, that's
go ahead.
Kind of the beauty of sports, right? You have this player where he can, if you look at what he can be just from his tools, from what he shows you on certain nights, you'd say this is a max player. But then again, the injuries, the 2 of 14 against San Antonio, and this is kind of what it comes down to. And that's why I presume Jeff Peterson and the guys in the front office get paid hopefully a good amount of money, because they have to make these decisions. It's tough for sure.
Yeah, and I think the defense, and I want to make this clear too, I think the defensive issues the Hornets have on their bad nights does not fall. I don't know if it's felt that way at all to anybody, but it doesn't fall all on Brandon Miller's shoulders at all.
No,
any means.
No way.
And when they play their best defense, they're active in the passing lanes. They thrive off of live ball turnovers. Honestly, when the Hornets get a turnover, but the other team gets a chance to set their defense back, like I'm interested, somebody that's got synergy out there, somebody wants to check the percentage of how often they score on live ball turnovers compared to when, it's a dead ball turnover and they have to inbound the ball. I'd be really interested to see those stats, because I think there'd be a wide discrepancy. Anyways, this is a team thing, and I think it goes back to all along we're talking about a trade this summer or adding an extra piece. I just think they're just one guy away. I just don't know who it is, and I think that guy could be Brandon, but it's obvious on certain nights that they are still one dude away, and I can't wait to see how it plays out. Exciting times, nervous times, because I don't want them to botch it, but exciting times. I think that's going to do it for Buzz City Breakdown. For Albert Betcher, for Owen Watterson. Thank you guys for listening. Make sure you hit that like, subscribe button. We don't ask you to do anything else. We try not to do ad runs or nothing through here right now. We're just trying to talk ball and give you guys what you want to hear. Make sure to give Albert, go ahead and plug your social media real quick, because I don't know your Twitter handle.
No socials as of yet, but you can read my stuff. You can read my stuff under Albert Betcher on Charlotte Hornets on SI, where you can also read Owen stuff, of course.
I appreciate that. What a wonderful way to close. For Owen, for Albert, thank you guys. We'll see you next time.